What is accent? Taught by Sherry Summers.
Hi, I'd like to talk about the topic of the day, and that is, what is an accent exactly? What is accent? Who has an accent? Well, like I said before, everybody has an accent. You have an accent, I have an accent. There are different kinds of accents. There are different language accents, for example, a Russian accent, a Chinese accent, and then there are accents within the language. In the United States alone, we have a Southern accent. We have an Eastern accent. These are also called dialects. But there are a little bit different ways of speaking, and definitely when you go outside of the United States, we hear British accents, Australian accents, and even within a smaller region, we can hear different styles of speaking. Now, like I said, I have an accent that tends to be more Western United States. I'm living in California, and I pretty much have a California accent, but I didn't grow up here. So I've picked up my accent in all the different places that I've lived in my life. But basically, it's Western United States. And feel free to follow my accent. You can adjust it just a little bit to whatever fits your region, especially if you're living in North America. If you're on the East Coast, for example, it may be a little bit different than the South or the West, and this goes for the U.S. and Canada too. If you're outside of North America, you have a lot more leeway in the style of accent that you can use. But we're going to be dealing mainly with this West Coast United States accent, and even though I do speak it, I think it's okay. I think it's an okay accent to pick up because, let's face it, California is where Hollywood is. Hollywood has all of the movies. People all around the world watch movies from Hollywood, and it's a pretty accepted kind of accent. But it's up to you. You'll need to pay attention to people around you and what it is that they're doing, all the little variances that different people use. So now let's break accent down into a few pieces. Let's break accent into 4 pieces. You'll see something called 4 parts of accent. Now I've arranged these in no particular order, but let's start with the first one. The first one we'll call voicing. Voicing. Voicing? What's that? Very interestingly, very few people talk about voicing. But when I say voicing, what I really mean is, where does your voice come from? Well, of course, you'll say to me, Sherry, well, my voice comes from my voice box and then out through my mouth. And, well, that's true. But let's look at some different instruments just for fun. Think about a guitar. The guitar has a body that's fairly big. It's got a big cavity. And when you strum a guitar, you hear a fairly deep sound. But now think about a violin. It's kind of the same shape. It's a string instrument. But if you were to run your fingers over the strings of a violin, you would get a higher pitch than you would with a guitar. Because the cavity is smaller. That opening area is smaller. Well, you can do the same thing with your voice. You can push your voice out of different areas of your body, believe it or not. Your face, your throat, your chest, and you'll get a different sound. So, for example, when I speak English, I can really feel the sound coming from right in the bottom of my throat and the top of my chest. But a good contrast to English would be something like Chinese. If I studied Chinese and I spoke Chinese with a nice deep sound like I do in English, I would sound very American. Now, my Chinese isn't good, but listen. Ni hao ma, ni hao, ni hao, ni hao. How are you? Ni hao. Hello. Ni hao ma. Hello. How are you? Very low sound. My teacher would probably say, no, you've got to make your sound higher. In fact, you bring it up kind of into the nasal area, right around the nose. Ni hao ma. Now, Chinese speakers, don't laugh at my Chinese. It's terrible. But if you notice the difference, you'll hear that the sound is coming from the cavity around the nose. This is a good, well, pretty good Chinese sound, very high in the face. But when I speak English, I speak deeper, a little bit deeper, closer to the chest area. Every language is spoken from a little bit different area. If you want to speak English well, you will think about where your voice comes from. Now, people always ask me, how can I do this? Here's a few techniques that you can do to make your voice a little bit deeper or lower into the chest. One of them is to simply drop your voice. So, for example, if you're a woman, you might think of yourself as a man. Hi, how are you? Just for practice purposes. Or if you're a man, you may want to think of yourself as a deep bass singer. Hello, hello. So that may help you a little bit. But one thing I find that helps a lot of people to think about where their voice comes is practice bringing your voice out on your air, on your breath. So instead of squeezing it a little bit higher through the throat or the nose, you want to let it come out from your lungs. So try this with me. Take a deep breath. Hi, 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 hi. Now I'm pushing my sound from my lungs as I speak. It's tiring, but it's good practice. See if you can feel where it's coming from. This is the American voice. Sometimes it helps if you just practice with a sexy voice, pulling that sound just up from your lungs and out. Hello. Now, of course, I don't want you to go around doing this all the time unless you're in a romantic situation. But just talk to yourself sometime. Talk to yourself when you're in the car or when nobody's around. Try deepening your voice a little. See how it feels. It's not going to be natural for a while. It's going to take some time. But one thing I really would like for you to do is start paying attention to native English speakers, particularly North American native English speakers. Where does their voice come from? Can you hear? If you have native English speakers around you, excellent. Start listening to them. If you don't, get out some good Hollywood DVDs and listen to the actors. Where does the voice come from? And you'll be surprised. Now, of course, different people have different styles. I know some young American girls who say, "Hi, how are you?" That's their own style. And sometimes it's more of a social style, especially among young women. But overall, you'll notice that Americans and Canadians speak with a little bit lower voice than maybe you realized. Now, again, this depends on what your own native language is. Your own native language may also have a little bit deeper voice, but pay attention to Americans around you because it may be a little different than you thought. So second on our list is rhythm and intonation. These are two parts that make one whole. Rhythm is exactly what you think it is. It's the beat. It's the speed and the beat. Just like we have different rhythm for different kinds of music. We have a rhythm that would be good for jazz, rhythm that would be good for classical music, and rhythm that would be good for some kind of rock or hip-hop. Different kinds of music have different kinds of rhythm. Da, 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 da. Or da, 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 da. It depends on the music that you're listening to. Well, language is the same way. Every language has its own rhythm, its own speed. And intonation comes from the word tone, which is related to the sound, or also called the music of the language. This is the pitch, the ups and the downs. So rhythm and intonation is music. It's how the music is spoken. And every language has its own rhythm and intonation, and that's what those 9-month-old babies were already producing and what they'd already picked up at such a young age.